Hi, my name is Amy Joy. Welcome to this episode of I'm Noticing.
Hello,
Hi.
how are you?
Feeling kind of like jittery or like noticing coming down from like a rushed feeling and then frustration about that feeling. And then somewhat settling. How about you?
And noticing quite a bit of excitement. So that energy is not allowing me to shift easily into this space. Yeah, I feel curious what needs are being met by the excitement. Although I also notice like a disinterest in following that thread. Yeah, I'm feeling kind of stuck in the moment because there's a part of me that's like awkward about not having anything in mind to say. So it's like, but then it feels uncomfortable to just kind of drop in without anything remotely contextual.
Hmm. I notice like almost it doesn't quite get off the ground, but like a guilty feeling starts to show up, and there's a like I have the impulse, I'm noticing the impulse to make a judgment that like the burden of context is always on you. There's a want to like it's like I feel I'm a little bit skeptical about if this is like because I like am I trying to force feeling some appreciation of the guilt, or am I actually appreciating the guilt? But it does start to like clarity starts to come up around maybe one of my needs that I want to support for like collaboration or contribution. Yeah, that's I have a need for contribution, and then a guilty feeling comes up around it as I hear you say that. Then just like I have the impulse to slow down because I'm noticing just how much can happen hearing you say what you've said thus far. I'm like, oh, I could, yeah.
Yeah, I'm remembering something I was like curious to mention to you. feel some muddiness around it. I have a reservation about being overly contextual. So yeah, I can kind of feel there's a part of me that's trying to navigate a way to cheat the process in a way to refer to this thought, while at the same time I was noticing like an acceptance of the thought as being like share worthy. So, so yeah, I think there's just an overall tension that's coming up around, I think, how I would like to approach this call more generally. So it feels like there's a black and whiteness around that. So I do feel more like opening up as I name that, though. Yeah, I think so. I'm noticing my needs for like expression. I don't know what to call this exactly, but like a need for reaction, authentic reaction. I don't know. I guess it's just curiosity. Um, yeah, and the possibility of like collaboration or fairness. But I was noticing how little effort I put into naming the different episodes. I edit them, which I feel some like humor and enjoyment around because I can recognize that there's a different timeline where like a perfectionist part of me like spends a lot of energy trying to come up with very specific titles. But I also noticed um yeah, a familiar part come up that's worried if I'm like hogging too much. Most like glory or attention or something. I'm not sure exactly what, but yeah, so I was noticing like a desire to like ask you to title something if you want, or at least make the offer.
I'm noticing the impulse. I'm noticing enjoyment as I'm hearing from you. And there's an impulse to like point out the many opportunities that you've there's an assessment around this, but there's a part of me that's making the assessment that you've created a few opportunities where I could have yeah, that would have really supported my need for contribution, or like had, yeah, it was like there are many opportunities to contribute. um so I'm noticing a part of me is like reacting to maybe feels like it's trying to has the impulse to debate with that assessment that came up for you of like hogging the I actually can't remember the language, but yeah, hogging something. Um, and then I start to feel guilty as I notice how combative that part of me is. And kind of a wondering of like how, as I imagine into that, like how long would I spend on titling something? Um, Now I'm starting to wonder if I'm cheating a little bit by like answering a question or something.
Feeling curious about my reaction to what you just said, because I was, yeah, I noticed like this kind of feisty, not argumentative, but like pushy in some way, with this energy of like the essence of it was like just trusting what you feel to validate like whether or not you're doing the right thing or not, instead of like some process. And I'm kind of sensing that it's a more articulate version of the judgment I hear toward myself when I listen back to these, of like, yeah, there's a judgment that I'm trying to do something beyond doing what feels authentic. I am feeling a bit frustrated at the moment as I recognize like missed opportunity, because I have this other thought going through my head that like reacting to you is valuable, and so I should be like listening to these more often, or like paying closer attention, or gets more nebulous than that, like it's just like or this or that or the other. Yeah, that's kind of highlighting a very difficult balance that I'm trying to navigate in these calls and more broadly, of like essentially feeling like I've gotten too familiar with NVC, or like IFS or whatever you want to call it. Just like that it's actually becoming more difficult to express myself authentically because it's so familiar. But then like the push to break that familiarity is also like just creating a lot of pressure that doesn't necessarily feel good. So it's like, how do I balance those two things. Yeah, I feel a bit tense and jittery at the moment as it feels like there's a part of me that perceives that whatever the answer to that is, I have to start enacting it, like starting right now, and practice it through this call. So it's very like, yeah, just tense, jittery, and it feels like it's standing at the edge of something.
I'm noticing kind of noticing a constricted feeling around excitement, and I was noticing the impulse to begin to speak. I imagine like felt like an impulse to speak, and the constriction is not wanting to rush, and the part of me is connecting to what it was hearing you describe, and there's like a rush to say some version of a like me too, and the constriction is noticing it's hard to be curious about the constricted feeling around it, which makes, yeah, I'm feeling some feeling compassion towards myself for the discomfort I'm experiencing, and then some surprise to say that and it be actually like true. I'm feeling also some hopefulness, or it feels something that feels like hope, and envisioning the potential to have a have more new experiences with utilizing some of these practices.
Feel like some curious, but some demanding energy around that. Like a part of me really wants the details about what what new experiences are you hopeful? Um, Yeah, I noticed some like hopefulness showing up for me around it's kind of like a bittersweet quality to it, but it's like it's kind of stuck in the judgment that I'm not quite, guess I'm not connected to my own satisfaction, but it's kind of like feeling hopeful and encouraged, kind of delighted that maybe in spite of that, like you would still be experiencing something that surpasses a standard or an expectation. Something kind of I don't want to say like crunchy to that thought. Kind of picture like trying to put crunchy peanut butter on bread and it doesn't like go smooth because it's crunchy. Has that like feel to it that's not quite satisfying. So yeah, that's bringing up a part of me that's afraid of putting myself second. Notice some like tiredness, kind of roachiness to that part. And it actually feels very opposite to the kind of excited energy that I was feeling right before this call, where like I was focusing on improv at the time. Yeah, I can kind of feel that this part is it's influencing some impulsivity in my system. So I can feel like it wants me to leap into different or new experiences without much consideration in the hopes that that will kind of satisfy putting myself first, which I notice as I say it doesn't quite feel right. Yeah, I'm just kind of sitting with that for a moment because there's something murky that I'm kind of just accepting that um, it'll surface at its own time.
Noticing sadness around well, there's a judgment starts to come up around using that language of having sadness around something, and that kind of interrupted the expression. And there's a pleading, kind of like a part starts to plead a bit to avoid that, avoid what can be a cycle of starting to speak and then finding a problem, and then how it can build on itself. It's just like, oh, please don't do that again. Just like find a different way to express yourself. And I am curious about how it ties into the original sadness, which is connected to the need for expression in this specific moment, expression of excitement around this experience or this process, and just noticing how infrequently I express the excitement I do feel in this space, or um, or express excitement connected to this experience that happens outside of this space. And right now, I'm just settling into the sadness of it, and that feels unfamiliar, or like I don't spend as much time with the actual feeling as I am right now. An impulse comes up to like immediately articulate how valuable that is, but I'm feeling some freedom around not having to act on that impulse.
Noticing some heaviness around having listened to the previous recording earlier today, and what's kind of sticking out in that for me is like sense of satisfaction or like a judgment that that call was good. Yeah, I'm noticing maybe like a need for trust. So I can feel a lot of activity around trying to discern what exactly made it good and like how to recreate that. Noticing some sorrow. Feels like a part that is somewhat burdened by my general experience of stuckness around like uncertain how to express myself in a way that feels, I don't want to say like alive. And I'm kind of noticing like a numb, kind of bored feeling. I can kind of picture it like absorbing like NBC terminology, just to put a label to it, and kind of like taking the effect away from like authentic expression. I notice like a disappointment at the core of that numbness, and it's like, yeah, this part is kind of pointing to any of the several dissatisfactions I have about life, and it's kind of saying like, shouldn't, again, just to oversimplify, like NVC have solved all these problems. And I notice there's like an edge to this part that kind of has like really idealistic thinking, like everything would be perfect. But there's like an other side to this part which is a bit more realistic, like it's just looking for a baseline satisfaction in certain aspects of life. Yeah, this numbing part kind of has like a bucket attitude. I, I kind of associate it with like just wants to like lay on the couch, put its feet up and watch TV and kind of yeah, like give up, I guess. Do feel a sense of appreciation for that perspective. Yeah, I think I'm kind of wanting to take some accountability toward my system that I think I did start out pursuing things like NVC or IFS or authentic relating or whatever else as with parts active in me that were like painting it as a solution that would fix everything or make everything like maybe not perfect, but that's kind of the term that comes up. Yeah, and I'm noticing like some frustration now coming up that's I noticed like questioning if maybe I'm needing like guidance or support or maybe something more like community even, and there's like this feeling of frustration there that well the judgment is that should have been there when I was young so that I'm not trying to sort this out as an adult.
I'm noticing wanting to connect with you in this moment, and then some fear as I say that. Is it that? Yeah, I feel fear saying that. Like it, heart starts to imagine like that implications that would have on how I was receiving what you were describing. I have an impulse to express what I was like resonating with as you were speaking. And I'm starting to feel curious about why, or maybe what's happening in me that is like potentially like there, yeah, something in me feels like distant as you're talking. I'm noticing a part that is used to how I might usually do other kinds of conversations, like it's hearing you speak and it has a lot of questions and it wants to ask, yeah, it wants to ask a lot of questions, or it wants to express parts or like parts of what you're sharing that I relate to. And then it knows it's not going to do that. And so there's like a like pulling back almost. Yeah. It feels like a different part tries to almost if it were like holding its arm out to like hold that one back, like, okay, like you can't do that. I'm feeling a little bit, yeah, I'm starting to feel sad uh, as I notice the dynamic. It just kind of, or it's not even fully sadness, but just some a want for some relief between, like a relief of whatever tension and like far away. I'm wanting different language for that, but right now it's like the the impulse to or the want to communicate in a particular way that is met with the resistance to doing so is like I can start to feel far away. And then there's a want to, in this moment, I'm feeling like excitement is too strong of a word, but like kind of interested in that looking different.
Hmm. I was noticing that I was feeling excited to share like a second layer of what was happening for me before, of like there was, yeah, dissatisfaction that it didn't feel particularly vulnerable. So the dissatisfaction was connected to a judgment that it wasn't purposeful. And then like I'm aware that even as I was saying about how like there's a part of me that's disappointed, like NVC hasn't fixed or made everything in life wonderful. It's like there was a little tiny amount of energy in the background that was like, oh, I bet everyone can relate to that. And then it like put a twist on what I was saying of like not just the expression of that disappointment, which I think does, it was initially feeling somewhat vulnerable, but I could feel it kind of twisting into like there's a part of me that starts to say like, but it's not because now you're describing an experience that everyone can relate to. And so now like I don't know what word to put to it, but that means I have some prominence or something is kind of the idea behind it, which completely like undercuts the disappointment and the like the part of me that's kind of yearning to express myself in a way that feels vulnerable and like authentic. Yeah, and I do notice like the frustration coming back up because like I just noticed there's images of a couple people I know who I sure I'm oversimplifying their life, but like in my eyes, they have like secure attachment or they're like secure and confident or like self-assured without effort. Whereas I could describe myself those ways, but it's all with effort. And it's like it's like the frustration is like yeah, there's like a hopelessness there. It's like I don't even know what it's supposed to feel like to be authentic because I wasn't. I mean, I do notice some memories that are exceptions to this, but like I wasn't raised to like experience that. And so now it's like I'm just in a sense kind of guessing what I'm supposed to be aiming at, which feels very helpless. Do you notice like a spark of excitement though, as I'm kind of identifying this as like possibly like an this it's like an offshoot of vanity in a sense because this part is relating everything I'm thinking and saying against like, well, how will this sound to others? And excitement is that I kind of want to increase the priority to which I am like aware of the parts of me that are like vain, self-conscious. Yeah, I do notice some like creative thoughts coming up about like how I could challenge the familiarity I have in a way that would like feel more vulnerable. So I do feel like some relief around that. Actually, quite a bit of relief because I wasn't even noticing how heavy that was all feeling until I just felt the relief there. Yeah, and I'm actually like curious if I'll notice a difference in my voice significantly because I'm having the sense that my abdomen was like really tight and my voice was maybe like coming out in spurts or something.
I was noticing, mm, I'm struggling with with beginning to articulate it, but noticing a impulse to in I don't yeah, maybe encourage. There was a part of me was starting to like want to like say encouraging things, or that was the impulse it was showing up with, but then it was sort of turning to started to feel a little bit more like encouraging myself around some of these things, like trying to encourage parts of, or yeah, encourage a part in my system that feels like shows up as like, oh, you've ruined, you've it's like you've ruined NBC, or you've taken IFS and you've ruined it. um it's yeah, it's that part is just like, it's connected to what that part really remembers, what it felt like when these principles were like really freeing, and it's reacting to what um, can show up as constricted and rigid or like formulaic. And so I'm starting to wonder about, I'm starting to not feel clear on like the parts differentiating what all is happening with that. But I also really, based on how frequently this comes up, it's not curiosity yet, but I'm feeling I want to make it like, I want to have an intention to get curious about a part that, like, if it if I think I'm hearing a negative assessment, like as I'm in this space with you, and if I think I'm hearing a part of you start to assess yourself negatively, there's embarrassment to say this out loud, which feels like it means it's important, but I'm really beginning to notice how frequently like a part of me really has the impulse to want to like argue with that part, or like offer a reframe. And it doesn't feel disingenuous in that, like, it does feel like that part is like, oh, how did you how did that come up, or that's not my experience. And I'm like, more so feels like I'm forcing myself to say it out loud rather than being able to get curious at this point, because I want to, like, I want to stay like, mm, I want to pay attention to that. So I guess I'm noticing that I'm expressing an intention to stay, or to eventually get curious about that.
Yeah, I notice being drawn to follow a thread. I was gonna say, and I'm like accepting of that because it's meeting some needs. I notice I'm feeling curious if that's true, that I have to accept that in the moment. Yeah, I am starting to notice there's like it's like a little bit of a weight attached to this particular meeting, but it feels like it's like these meetings more broadly. part of me with an agenda to use this meeting to like get to the bottom of something. And I'm noticing like how easy it is to perceive that as normal and natural and even positive because it does align with like a meta intention I have for the meetings of like experiencing some sort of growth for the process. But yeah, when I actually like slow down and kind of feel into it, I'm noticing that it doesn't really resonate with my intentions in the smaller scale of, yeah, being more like present and open. Notice a bit of like a protest around that of like, but what if nothing shows up or like nothing significant shows up during the call? And there's like a familiarity to that, which I've mentioned before, of like, there's a part of me that's not sure there's actually anything wrong. Maybe I'm just not accepting like prior growth because that seems unfamiliar. Yeah, I notice I feel like curious what it would look like to accept that, although I'm not sure that that's what it is, but just the possibility of accepting it. And that kind of circles me back around to the frustration that is like upset that I wouldn't know what that should look like. And so it's like, yeah, actually is bringing up a lot of familiarity to when I was young and I think expected to do things or know how to do things that I had not been shown or like, it's more than that. It's more like there was an indifference toward whether or not I had been shown, but like the expectation was placed on me. Yeah, I'm just noticing more generally like a shift toward a more sympathetic. Yeah, there's more like a sympathetic feel to my system at the moment.
I'm noticing a stillness, like a stillness start to show up. Hearing you describe. A part of me is coming up right now that's like, no, start over, take two. Like it wants a take two. It's like this isn't gonna go well. And I'm frustrated as I really want to be able to articulate this, and it um feels important. I'm getting the sense that this is like a recurring, or yeah, this feels familiar in that I've felt it before in this context. I'm A lot of energy is starting to like, energy feels like maybe not, like, I'm not sure about my use of the word energy, but I'm not able to identify exactly, like, I'm not feeling very connected or like in my body at present. And then there's like, I'm not wanting to, there's like a caution about continuing to talk as I'm noticing that. And I'm wondering like how could I have a question of like what might it, it's like what would it look like to be present with what's happening with me right now, because it feels like something that doesn't, I haven't quite found a like fluid way of expressing in this context. And I have the impulse to ask you how you are, which is not unfamiliar to, that's not unfamiliar. And that seems to come up. Oh, and now I'm feeling kind of sad that like that would be like asking you how you're doing. It's like I'm really noticing how like that question in particular, when it feels like an impulse to move away from my experience, but it's like I'm wondering like how often it's like that. Yeah, I'm feeling sad that that would be like the question I would ask as an impulse to maybe like shift away from my own discomfort. Like that doesn't feel congruent with the spirit with which I would want to ask someone how they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed some like tense, uneasy, kind of cautious energy in my system. Started to notice it when I finished talking last time, and I was aware that I was like giving you a cue that like I was done talking instead of, yeah, I'm like uncertain what it should look like, but I notice like there's a part of me that's wanting trust, just like trust in the process of, yeah, it's not fully articulate. Yeah, I'm just kind of slowing down with this uneasiness. It's kind of shaking around in my stomach a little bit. Yeah, and it does have this feel to it. There's an image that comes up that's, I think it's like it's more of a stereotypical or like a trope of like a kid who's, I don't know, maybe fidgeting or doing something or wants to do something and then like sees their parent like shoot them a glance and then they like freeze up and go still and like suppress that energy or that urge until it kind of like comes back again. Yeah, feeling some dissatisfaction at labeling that as a trope, as if like I can't relate to that. Yeah, I am feeling curious about wh why it's showing up in this context, though. Yeah, think I'm, or the thought that comes to me is like this process is creating so much freedom that it's almost reminiscent of being a kid who like experiences lots of new things or something like that. And it's like, it's a bit scary to part of me because it has this expectation of like disapproval or like a sharp, yeah, like sharp disapproval or negative reaction. I can feel a bit of like flaring up in my stomach as I say that, which feels a bit more like full on freeze type fear. And I notice a bit of like an intellectual part. I notice an intellectual part showing up to like, it's questioning how would I like to relate to a part like this in this context, in this experiment. Yeah, and I'm not sure why, but this part seems to kind of like dissipate at being noticed and named, which I seem to have some intuition about because I notice like a strong sense of concern kind of washing over me as I recognize that. And I'm like fighting the urge to give you a cue to like you can start talking now.
I should I let you finish what you were about to say? I asked a question and just notice the impulse to start speaking and maybe just, yeah, trust that you can, yeah, interrupt if you need to. Hmm. Noticing. I'm coming, yeah, starting to notice while you're speaking a part that imagines, like imagines you're frustrated, and then it's, it feels helpful to maybe change my language and say, noticing there was recently a part that is like, it starts to imagine that you're frustrated, and it's like from its perception, it's like you're frustrated with me. And then I was noticing it is surprised when that's something is like pointing to that not being the case. Or yeah, it's like if there's something occurring or something within what you were just expressing was like, it's very evident that that's not occurring. So I was becoming aware. This feels like a kind of there, yeah, a part starts to make an analysis of it as like projection. Like it's like, oh, you're projecting that um onto Spencer. And so I'm starting to wonder how often that happens. Yeah, I'm wondering how often that happens. And I'm like, yeah, I know that there's a part of me that's like, well, that's saying like, we'll just check in with that right now, or just like do something about that right now, or explore it in this moment. And then something something is happening internally that where it's hard to do that. And then I notice embarrassment acknowledging that. Yeah, like that's not like I shouldn't have a hard time like just asking or inquiring as to something that's like happening for me internally. But I do notice that this particular experience of like a part that starts to assume or imagine that you're frustrated with me, like that in particular is hard to like check in with. um there's I'm feeling sadness about how sadness as I start to think about the implications of how, more like in a theoretical sense, how that might impact like specifically this interaction, but it's like I'm beginning to imagine like how that just like conceptually speaking, how that could impact interactions. Now I've got a timekeeping part showing up. It's kind of like that part, it feels mm, that part feels scared. Yeah. Like I notice I'm feeling scared because I can't gauge how long I've been talking, and it's like it could be 45 minutes or it could be 45 seconds, and I really am not, since I'm not looking at the clock, it's like I don't know. And now, yeah, I'm noticing I'm smiling when I say fear, but it does feel so. Then I'm just more like oh, I should be curious about the fact that I'm feeling scared and smiling.
Noticing it's interesting to me because it feels like it's divided through the left and right side of my body, but like there's kind of like a pleasant contentedness and just kind of tuning into it. I noticed on the other side there's like an exhaustion, yeah, kind of like a flatness. Seems to be like it's almost like it's using the last gasp of energy that it has to like fuel the contentedness to like trick me into thinking I'm content. Because I noticed I was thinking a few minutes ago, like feeling pretty content, and given the time, this might be a good point to start wrapping up. I noticed like some suspicion arises at first of like the immediate reaction is to kind of like turn all the lights on the tired parts that are pumping up a facade of contentedness, and it's almost like accusatory energy of like, why aren't you being authentic, and like, why are you trying to trick the system? And I noticed that that feels like a familiar kind of harsh, kind of sharp reaction in my system to anything that doesn't feel authentic. It's to kind of be accusatory toward it. So I feel like regret, some kind of little bit of like embarrassed, lamenting, and some sympathy toward those parts for, I mean, the judgment is not feeling safe to just authentically express exhaustion. yeah, I'm feeling curious about that exhaustion now because I do notice there's something to it that's like it's that part that feels exhausted. It's not that I'm exhausted, and that part is the part who is aware of it. Yeah, I have a familiarity with this part in recent months as well. Feeling curious about how and why this is, but it seems to take on the brunt of a lot of energy in my system that seeks novelty and challenge and putting myself into uncomfortable situations or like biting off a lot to chew. Yeah, I am curious why this part like bears the brunt of that. Not super clear, but I'm getting the sense that this part kind of gets locked in the basement with whatever exiled energy is in my system that is suppressed by the novelty seeking. It's kind of like the feeling that that stuff's getting locked in the basement and there's a bunch of, it feels like the house is being renovated on top and what's locked away is just part of the old house that's just gonna stay down there forever. And kind of feel that that fear is washing away a little bit. Right? The fear is washing away quite a lot around the recognition that like that's not my intention in seeking novelty or challenge. Yeah, and I'm kind of acknowledging some familiar old patterns that pop up in some of these scenarios and how that would feel like it's re-exiling parts of me. I have some curiosity about being like intentional with that and also a bit of like nervous pressure around like a sense of demand that I have to come up with something right away to not repeat that pattern. Feel like some nebulous connection happening that's inspiring some hope.
I notice a lot of excitement. Hmm. I notice excitement feeling. Hmm. Excitement around. It's hard to describe, but hearing something happening, hearing you describe something that's happening inside of you, like I'm noticing that's an assessment. A part of me started to kind of compare, like, yeah, this part of me was starting to kind of like compare it was, what it was assessing as like something that's really happening inside of you. And then it's kind of like, it doesn't feel like harsh in like towards me in my system, but it is kind of like, why don't you just do your work or something? Or it's like, why aren't you just doing your work? Like right here in this context. And then I was, I am kind of curious about that. Or yeah, I'm aware that sometimes I am and feel clarity that I am, or like that I am, yeah, interacting. I don't know. Yeah, engaging with my system. I mean, really expressing or putting words to that, I really like another part of me is just upset to like it's bringing up like comparison is the, yeah, part of me is like comparison is like the fast track to misery, like what or something like that. But there, yeah, I am encouraged to, there's something in, yeah, there's something that I'm interested in with this that I'm struggling to put words to. And yeah,
I was expecting you to say, how are you doing?
I was about to. How did you know?
Hey, I notice I'm feeling like fairly calm and content. And there's I have this awareness of a disconnect between like different angles of experience of like, yeah, there's a part of me that's broadly speaking, it's judging me against a standard of perfection at like performing to like the intentions of this container. And I'm always gonna come up like significantly short of that perfection. And then it's also like linked into that part that's kind of like loosely vanity, self-conscious, or like assessing how what I'm saying will be perceived by others. And all that energy is like producing kind of like a flat dissatisfaction, at least to the parts of me that are engaged in assessment. But yeah, I'm noticing that like in other experiences, I'm not perceiving it that way. And I was remembering something that came up in the last meeting and hearing myself say it in the recording, like I felt some vulnerability around just hearing it back. I don't sense I would have felt saying it. And I noticed kind of like a wave, noticing a wave of hopefulness kind of wash through me as I like connect to the sense of possibility of different like angles of experience, or like the possibility of coming up with different angles of experience to kind of heighten that sense of not just vulnerability, but like almost like freshness, and also like a sense of like freedom or escape from all the assessing energy. Yeah, and that's bringing a big wave of relief through my system as like even though that assessing energy can feel heavy in as I'm experiencing it, like it's not ever present. That's actually like freeing me up also to appreciate the way that those assessing parts like remind me of what the process is I'm trying to do and like why I'm trying to do it, even if it doesn't come across, I don't know, in like an encouraging tone. Yeah, and there's actually something kind of circling back to that image of like the kid with energy catching like a sharp Um, yeah, being shot a look from his parent. Like there is that sense that the assessing energy is all about like that part can direct that kid to do like good things, then that will be met with like an approving look from the parent instead of like a sharp look. Notice I'm wanting to like piece that all together and like tie a bow on it, but I'm feels like a bit much at the moment. And I do sense that like just listening back will give me some clarity that I don't have in this exact moment.
I'm wanting to like just like kind of wanting to summer in a summary kind of way. Mm. I'm both remembering earlier in the call when I like, noticed a really angry part of me that's directed, like directed internally. Yeah, like I'm noticing now that I'm remembering, but was able to forget. That's hard to say, but earlier in the call was kind of becoming aware of a part that is angry or frustrated at other, yeah, it's hard to say like at me, but like at other parts of me or something. And then right now I'm almost like surprised to realize I've like lost touch with it again. Like, oh, I was noticing that earlier, but then I forgot and remembered again right now. And there's some, I'm also feeling relief to reconnect or getting, yeah, like be reminded back to and kind of identify that again as it feels I'm it feels familiar or like it's here a lot of the time and but not something, maybe it's like super familiar. So I'm kind of there's some excitement over like, oh, I wonder how often this is here. And I'm just like really used to it. And then yeah, that's there. I have the impulse to wrap up what I'm saying with, yeah, right here with that. That's exciting to notice. And how are you?
Hmm. Yeah, I have an impulse to like experiment with a projection that I think it's a mirror of a projection that like this assessing part may have and the fearful part. There's like a curiosity of what will happen if I say it out loud. but I just kind of want to see what will happen. Because I'm sensing that, yeah, my assessing part is afraid, wants to make sure I impress you so that I don't meet your disapproval. And then there's a fearful part that's afraid of your disapproval because it's wanting like freedom. There's something true in that, but I can feel it's not quite complete. But I do sense it will kind of come together when I listen back. Yeah, and I'm feeling curious in the sense of like why is the perception that you are the judge? The container is like the standard, and it's projecting you to be the judge. I'm noticing that that's tying into that part of me that like accepts that I'm supposed to put others' needs first. And I'm noticing that it makes sense, but it's also like there's a lot of missing pieces, so it like doesn't make sense. And I notice a bit of like guilt and a bit of sorrow as well, showing up. The thought that like, yeah, not treating you fairly to the degree that those parts are blending with me. That also doesn't quite fully resonate, but there's like a sense of truth to it. Yeah, I feel a bit of, feel some curiosity and kind of like a willingness to kind of just leave it at that and see where that leads.
I'm noticing curiosity about what you're describing. And then a kind of a double bind or mm, noticing tension that a part of me is assessing to be a double bind of like there's a want to explore how the part of me that starts to imagine you're frustrated at it or at me, and then noticing how there is a like really frustrated, angry part in in my system. I was so the tension was coming up around things that felt things I was relating to in what you're sharing, and then also like, well, it's kind of like, well, you can't just say like, oh, I relate to that, but you also can't say like don't not say anything, because then it's like it's like to not acknowledge relating to what you were sharing felt just like an egregious lack of vulnerabilities, but it just got really, it just felt like the whole process around what how to articulate any of that. I'm feeling the heaviness of like how overtaxed that was. Yeah, like the yeah, I'm starting to just like imagine a like an obstacle course, and um like like yeah, start to imagine an obstacle course, and it just kind of feels like falling off of one of the like one part of it halfway through and giving up a little bit. I'm also aware that there's been an impulse to, or yeah, I'm aware that like a part of me has been thinking like it's kind of still, I don't know how to say this, but it's like a part of me think has been anticipating that we're about to come to a close, but it feels like it's been doing that for a really long time. And so I'm starting to wonder how long it's been doing that, and how, and it's kind of, yeah, I'm kind of curious about that. And yeah, I think, I believe that's, yeah, I believe that's what I'm working with.
I do feel satisfied to wrap up there.
Okay, sounds good.
Um, Talk to you soon.